at Cardiff University, and I have the pleasure of moderating this session on getting research published in the area of fintech. I'm joined with two distinguished scholars who are also editors of journals in finance, Professor David Feldman from UNSW, who is the editor of Quarterly Journal of Finance, and Professor Eshraghi, who is the editor of Journal of Fintech from Hebrew University. So we will hopefully keep this interactive, but first I'm going to ask David and Eshraghi to briefly introduce themselves and the journals they represent. And then I will do a brief introduction of the journal I represent. So Eshraghi and David, feel free to start, David.
David Feldman.
I think you need to keep this a bit closer to your...
1, 2.
Yeah, a bit closer.
David Feldman. I'm a professor at UNSW, Sydney, which is University of New South Wales. We are 3 editors at the Quarterly Journal of Finance. The publisher called us managing editors. The 2 other editors are, I'm lucky to be with them, they're fantastic people. Fernando Zapatero from Boston University started the journal about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, and has been editor since then. Bernadette Winton, she's in Ohio State. She's been generations, forever, the head of finance in Ohio State University. And I understand why they don't let her go from this position, being with her. I think that the quality of the editor is the main thing of a journal, the most important thing, and the motivation. So if in top journal, very top journals, the editors are actually constrained. The editors are serving the top profession and following agency theory are constrained in many ways from accepting innovation, from rocking the boat. We are completely independent. We love innovation, and we encourage any interesting and high-quality papers. Unfortunately for us, we have many submissions, over 90% are desk rejected. So we look for good papers, we encourage good papers, and there will be no quarrel with the processing. We never had. We are a general purpose paper, but we will be glad to accept the topics of this conference. We will be glad to dedicate a special issue. For that, we need 5 papers, 4 maybe, or more than 5 papers. And we will be glad even to appoint a special issue editor.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. Professor Wiener.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wiener. I'm professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And before I talk about the Journal of Fintech, I would like to add a few words about the QJF. Fernando Zapatero is a good friend and co-author of mine. I was associate editor of QJF when it started. I like this journal. I published a few papers in it. I edited several special issues. So I strongly recommend you to look at this journal. Editors are free, they're open-minded. You're very welcome to submit your papers there. And now let me say a few words about the Journal of Fintech. We started this journal with a group of colleagues a couple of years ago with the World Scientific, a very innovative publishing house from Singapore. And the idea was that regular academic journal are very, in my opinion, narrow-oriented. They look at specific topics which are considered to be fashionable, and they're not often open to other ideas. So when we started the Journal of FinTech, the idea was to provide a platform to 3 different types of people involved in this, in FinTech area. One part is more or less traditional, like people working at the academia, they want to publish, they want everybody to see their work, to be cited. The second part are practitioners. FinTech is not only theory. There are hundreds of companies. Only here in Lithuania, we heard about 280 FinTech companies. Very often, they have their ideas. Their ideas are different. They write white papers. They don't provide a proof and a regression and some Black and Scholes formulas. They come with an idea, let's do this and this service, let's change something in the current system. You cannot prove this, you cannot verify, you cannot wait 2-3 years to see whether the idea is valuable or not, but we can still publish it. The Journal of FinTech can still publish such a paper and say, you know what, this is the idea, everybody can look at it, everybody can adopt it, disregard it, do whatever you want. And the third category, which is also very important, there are regulators. There are many, many regulators. Almost every country has several types of regulators watching this financial industry, and each one has his, her own opinion how it should or should not work. And they also need sometimes a common platform where they can exchange ideas, show what worked, what failed. So we try to bring these 3 different categories of potential authors together. I led this journal for a couple of years. This year actually passed the editing job to Blanka Horvat from Oxford, and she continues. But again, if there is an interest, we can have a special issue, we can consider paper, we can appoint an editor. So we are very welcome to see many new papers, new ideas, not necessarily academic, academia, practice, and regulation. There are 3 major areas. We will be happy to see paper contributions from these areas.
Thank you, Svi and David. I will say a few words about the International Review of Economics and Finance, which is published by Elsevier. I'm one of the 3 editors of this journal. The journal has been around since the 1990s, and in the past 5 to 7 years, I think, it has grown quite a bit. Part of its growth, it really owes to the growth of fintech, because the journal has published quite a lot in fintech, and those papers have actually been cited as well, pretty well. Currently, the journal receives a very large volume of submissions, which is a major headache for us as the editors, because we have to be very selective and desk reject, and I believe it has currently an impact factor of 5.6. So it's a broad church. It publishes, in theory, any paper related to finance and economics, as long as there is a considerable contribution. With that, I like to actually, since I talked about, in fact, all 3 of us talked about the rejections, I like to ask my panelists to share their insights and best advice to researchers on how not to get this rejected, because often getting through the door is the first step, which in fact many young researchers find difficult. So what are, David and Svi, your thoughts, your advice on how to structure a paper, how to sell the paper, such that the editor and the reviewer, in fact, the editor at first, takes a liking to it and therefore does not hit that much dreaded reject button. Whoever, so would you like to start, Zvi? Okay.
Okay, I can start. You're right, many papers are desk rejected. And the typical situation for a desk rejection is when I get a paper saying, you know, I live in country X, we had this and this change, this led to something, and it's purely descriptive, then there is some regression, and there is results. So there are no wider applications. You cannot see how this specific environment or how this result can have any impact on anybody else. So this is the most typical situation when paper is almost immediately desk rejected. And the second insight, if you have some good ideas, don't wait to the conclusion, don't explain it only at the end. Try to explain even introduction in the abstract. The main point of the paper is A, B, C. Then it keeps interest, then it keeps understanding what are you doing, why are you doing. This is very crucial. And I think this is the best idea how to avoid an immediate rejection. And just let me tell you a brief story. Many years ago, I had a paper with Fernando Zapatero. We sent it to Review of Finance. And I remember the day we got a letter from the editor. So we started opening the referee reports, 2 reports, both are negative, just suggest rejecting the paper. And then there was an accompanying paper from Yassin Aitzahale. He was then the chief editor of RFS, saying, you know what, I read the reviews, I completely disagree, I like this paper, it is going to be published. So everything happens.
Thank you, Zvi. David?
Well, it's a good story and good for this editor. When you submit your paper to a general purpose paper like us, it has to be important, it has to be interesting. So that's the first test. Convince yourself it is and stress why it is. I'm behind Zvi saying the abstract. The abstract is the gate. It's like a barrier, it's a necessary condition for people to keep reading the paper, not just the journal editors and referees. Everybody, they read the abstract and then maybe they go away and maybe they study the paper. So I typically work on the abstract hours and hours and hours, write the abstract, 100 words, not too long, and leave it alone. After you leave it alone for substantial amount of time, depends on you, but you can come back, you have to come back and read it again with a different perspective. You forgot what you wrote, now you read and you re-examine it. And you go through this process with the co-authors until you are happy with the abstract. And over the career of the paper, you would twiggle with it, depends on various things. But the first round of the abstract is the essence. It has to be clear why the paper is interesting, why it is important, what it contributes to the literature, what is the contribution. Of course, what's the problem first? If you have a paper that demonstrates, then the doors are open. We have an array of excellent associate editor, and he protects them. We don't them send papers for them to reject and waste time. It's one thing. The other thing, the body, you pass the abstract, you read the paper, it has to be well executed. Everything's well executed, but that's needless to say, right? Because maybe the readers elsewhere don't read it carefully, but in the journal we read it carefully. And it has to be of sufficient level, not frustrating, both in exposition and in contents. The exposition is a signal to the contents. So I always send it to an editor, And I didn't switch to ChatGPT, even though you might find the first run with ChatGPT. But it should not, currently, it should not be the last run. So it should be maybe a professional editor that you're working with, and then yourself, of course.
Thank you, David and Sweet. Very, very good points. If I could add a couple of thoughts to what was said, completely agree that the abstract is very, very important. It needs to be polished. It needs to be not too long. We do get some papers with very long abstracts, which are full of acronyms, and often it seems that the author thinks that they have to sell the paper through fancy terminology, mentioning their sophisticated GARCH or econometrics or whatever. Unless you're submitting to the Journal of Econometrics, you're not probably selling your econometric contribution. You're selling the idea and the bigger implications, and the contribution probably goes beyond just the methodology. So don't just sell the methods, but focus on the big idea. I completely agree with that. I would also say the title is important. The title needs to be very sharp and interesting and not too boring, I think. And sometimes, again, probably you agree, we see papers from the rest of the world outside the US where, in fact, the authors do themselves a disservice by mentioning their name of the country. So for evidence from China, or evidence from Malaysia, or evidence from Lithuania. I'm not entirely sure, and feel free to disagree, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a good strategy, because we don't see a paper from US authors in US data saying, for example, capital structure and market efficiency evidence from the US. So why do we have this sort of implicit assumption that for all the US papers, there is no need to mention the US, but for everything else, we need to mention the country? People are going to read the abstract, they're going to find out where the data comes from, but don't necessarily shoot your paper down by mentioning evidence from the country, whatever that is. That's my personal view. There are also other little things which help you when it comes to sort of a race between you and another paper that the editor is quickly looking at. Sometimes the editors want to make sure that the authors are legit, they actually exist, because we do also get papers with ethical issues. All journals do. Sometimes fake authorships, fake affiliations. So you really want to make sure that you have a profile that is easily searchable and identifiable. I think that really helps. I'm not saying this is necessarily a requirement, but it does help. And again, David and Svi, feel free to disagree. But sometimes, obviously, what I do is I read the paper first, but also I want to make sure that this is a legitimate submission and not produced by a paper mill. So I want to make sure those authors exist. And so I sometimes go and search them up. And sometimes it's very difficult with authors coming from, for example, Asian institutions where the profiles are not easily identifiable or the names are very similar, especially from China. So I think it's a challenge, and it would be very helpful if, at least as authors, we make sure that we have a web presence, basically. Okay. Any thoughts on any of this? Of course, feel free to let me know, David and Svi. And from the audience, we don't have much time. So if there are any experiences you want to share with us, or any thoughts or any questions, feel free. This is your opportunity to ask any questions or give any comments. If not, please feel free to. Oh, yes, please.
We are publishing around actors, which you just presented before. And one of the big objections is we don't have quotes. There's nothing to quote. It's a new idea. And so you get turned down on that measure.
Yes, so you mean not references to cite,
No
basically.
reference to pre-established, except our own work.
I see.
There is no body of literature to be cited that would go deep.
Yes, it is a challenge, but also it is an attraction for an editor to be the first to publish a paper in a new area. So that would be, I think, it's a double-edged sword. That's my take on it. Yeah.
You just came a few minutes after we started. At the very beginning, I mentioned that the journal of fintech initially was created to bring together 3 different types of audiences. So one are people coming from academia. They usually have a long reference list, their colleagues, similar work, quotation. The second stream are people coming from practice, from fintech. They don't quote. They can say the similar idea was written by Vitali in 2000 something, and that's it. And the third stream are regulators. They don't quote in standard academic terms, but they bring similar regulations. So it depends on the journal. It should be fine if there is no quote. You can quote Piccioli and say he wrote it in 1500 something. So this is the latest reference. So it was, and the next step after him. So that's fine. What I would like to add is that finance with time became a huge area with many separate sub-areas. And every person who works on a specific topic typically works on it weeks, months, maybe years. And you're already familiar with all the terminology, with methods, but not necessarily your colleagues are as familiar as you are. So my advice is try to avoid being very laconic, very specific, many abbreviations, many methods. Not necessarily everybody else who is potential reader is aware of these methods, of these previous steps or something. At least what you can do, at least in the introduction, take a couple of paragraphs and write it in a language that a person who is smart enough but not necessarily specialist in finance can understand what you are talking about. Give your introduction, give it to a friend of you who is smart, who is not in finance, and check if he can at least understand what you are talking about and why is it important. So I think this can add a flavor to the paper and not make it too narrow, oriented only to 5 colleagues of you in the world who work on a similar issue.
So
David.
you heard some, what I think, excellent conditional advice. And I will add unconditional advice. We are a general paper. The fact that you are innovative, starting a new area, is something we love, we seek. I mentioned, maybe you were not there, that the main journal, the 3 top journal, are handcuffed, are bound to be okay, to be in the trend. And unfortunately, in finance, the trends are too important. Whatever the trend is, whether it's behavioral, whether it's ESG, whether it's climate, whether it's international. It started by a trend of options. An option came. I'm that old to remember. And the crowd follows. They start writing, look at the offering. They follow the trends. We like the quality, we like the innovation. So if you're innovative, this is for us unconditionally fantastic. And we look for it. Of course, we won't compromise the quality, but being provocative, being innovative, for us is an advantage. And if innovative paper hit the head against the wall in the very top journals, come to us. I repeat, I had a little pitch, a little maybe, in the first day, the end of the first day. And I will send everyone to go to YouTube to look for the curse of the top 5. The top 5 are top economics paper. economic journals. The panel is 5 editors of the top 5. 4 of them are Nobel laureates and Drew Freudenberg. So the Nobel laureate had this huge role of being rejected. Gene Hackman was asking Akerlof to tell the story about the market for lemon papers, who were rejected, according to Akerlof, 14 times and was in the drawer many, many years. The upshot of the conference is that in our journals, you guys cannot innovate. If you innovate, you'll be rejected from our journals. What does it mean? It means that the 5 editors admit their inability to run the journals the way they want, to accept innovative journals. And their solution is that the schools will not make publishing the top 5 a tenure criteria. So they say, read. But in our profession, reading innovative work is costly with no compensation. And when you reject top work, there's no accountability. So until we correct those, the equilibrium will not change. And from 2017, the time of the session, nothing changed, and I don't see it changing in the near future. Now, a side point is the 45 minutes listening to these people, it's a huge pleasure. They're smart, they articulate, and I listen to that second by second twice. Go there. But we are welcoming innovation. We are welcoming being provocative.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Zvi. I hope you found this helpful and insightful. Unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you so much for coming to this session, and feel free to find us during the rest of the conference, and we're open to chatting to all of you. All the best, and have a wonderful rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.